But it does bring up a question that I'm just going to insert into this conversation, because you talk a lot. Earlier you said if we follow the steps. Now you're saying doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think that for a lot of people, they don't, like, what are you talking about? Because it seems like, well, we're reading about ourselves, you know, like we talked about it being engaged with kind of superficially, like we're given this description of ourselves. And for a lot of people, I think that feels like work in and of itself.
Yeah.
For one thing, because we have to take a good long look, and that feels like work.
Yeah.
So why isn't that it? And what else is there?
So I'll give you kind of my basic rundown for what Enneagram work looks like.
Okay.
The basics are discover your type.
Okay.
You do that through self-observation.
What if you did discover it through a test and it felt right?
Well, so here's the thing about that is if you could get whatever answer you got from a test, but the only way for it to know if it feels right or if it's real is to self-observe. Does this actually fit? You know, you have to try it on, right? Regardless of how you got to a number, you have to self-observe to know what's happening. So you have to self-observe to know if it fits and if it's right. So whether you're just reading through the pages of a book or you took a test, you have to self-observe in order to find your type. And then, so after you've discovered your type, you have to continue to self-observe and watch how these patterns are playing out for you on a day-to-day basis, right? So you self-observe to understand your type. You self-observe to understand how it's showing up for you. My mentor, Leslie Brownstreet, talks about when we run into things and we really know our type, right? Like you get this place where like, yeah, that's me. And then there are always those little things that pop up that are like, ooh, but I don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
So what Leslie says that I think is so wise is to not ask if, but to ask how.
So don't ask. So if you're presented with like a stereotypical response that your type structure has, and you feel like resistant to it, like I don't do that.
Yeah.
You need to shift it to not whether or not you do it, but how you do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because these things, they show up in so many different ways.
Right.
Like they infinitely nuanced.
And a book can only say so much.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So you're watching how these things play out from a day-to-day basis. They could look, you could be quote unquote textbook in your type. You could play out exactly the way the book's described. Or you could be playing these things out and look very different than the books and the podcasts and the memes, etc. describe. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're any less your type if you're seeing it play out. I say all that, you have to self-observe to understand your type. You have to self-observe to see how the patterns are playing out in your life. And then what happens next is you have to have enough space. So there's kind of like a sub set of steps that I'm going to talk about in a second.
Okay.
But you have to have enough space when these patterns are coming up and you catch yourself, you observe yourself playing them out, you have to have enough space to ask if they're appropriate, if they're helpful, if they're moving you in the direction that you want to go. So to give an example from my personal life, to make this probably make a little bit more sense, as an 8, I have an extreme desire to keep the ball rolling, to make an impact, to show my strength, to show my resilience, my ability to continue to get things done in the face of adversity. And that often shows up for me in really pushing too hard, kind of at anything that I do. And what I've had to start working with is catching myself in the act, right? notice what I'm pushing too hard. And there's lots of cues about that for me. And then the real work for me comes in catching myself pushing too hard and then allowing myself to stop. So the last few days I've been trying to write, and and pretty soon it's like, okay, I sit down at the computer, I'm writing, and then all of a sudden I'm like this, and I'm writing, and I'm hunched over, and I'm like I'm feeling this like tightness in my chest, and my shoulders are hunched over, and I can feel, it's almost like blinders are coming on for me, right? Like I'm trying to push through, and when I catch myself in that, and sometimes it's not as blatantly physical as doing this, sometimes it's more subtle, but when I catch myself doing that, I have to take a breath. I have to notice the things that are running in my mind, in my heart, in my gut, right? 3 centers, 3-centered observation. And I have to ask myself, are these things real? Are they necessary? Are they true? You know, my mind's telling me, if you don't get through this and you don't write these 1,000 words, then you're not gonna be done on time, and you're gonna fail, and you're not gonna be able, like, you're weak, you're unfit for this position, you never should have done this in the first place, whatever, right? This like long list of things. And my heart is heavy and anxious and really just wrecked, for lack of a better word. And my body is tense. And so when all those things are happening, I know that I've gotten off track, right? I'm no longer operating out of the best and highest parts of myself, and so I have to take a break. I take a breath, and maybe a breath is all I need to recenter and refocus. Maybe I take a breath, and then I realize that I actually need to shut my computer for the time being. Maybe I need to get up, go for a walk. It could be anything, but this is the process of working with your type as it comes up. Now that looks obviously different for the 9 different types, but that's just an example from my own life to kind of show you what this looks like. Now, to kind of talk about the kind of sub-steps of that, you know, in order to notice how you're feeling in the moment, you have to have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask that because that's hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. In all the trainings that I've been in, and a lot of the work that I've done with the narrative, this process is something that we do in the moment, kind of constantly when we're doing panels, in trainings, when we're leading panels. You know, the panel facilitators are asking people, where do you feel that? How do you notice that? What's happening in your body? What's happening in your breath? Are these thoughts that you're having true, right? That's some big stuff. And, you know, kind of the go-to is, you know, can you feel your feet on the floor? Like you get to some really big emotional thing and like the whole room can feel it. And then the facilitator's asking, can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you ground yourself for just a moment? And I watch so many people get up on panels and be like, no, what are you talking about?
They can't feel their feet?
Yeah, they can't bring their attention into their body.
Wow. Okay.
And that's common. And even for a lot of people who can feel their feet on the floor or bring their attention inward, there's a very limited capacity to do that. And so the sub-step, you know, the sub-steps for, you know, creating the capacity to do this work is number 1, having a practice, right? Having a daily intentional practice where you work with all 3 centers. You take intentional time away to focus on how your body feels. Focus on your emotions and what's happening for you. Reducing your emotional reactivity. And working with your mind, working with your thoughts, working with your ability to pay attention. The second step, so these steps are actually outlined in my forthcoming book, The Conscious Enneagram. The second step is to have a teacher. So you can't have a practice without having a teacher because we are unreliable for ourselves.
Because I was like, a practice sounds great. I'm just going to go write in a journal for 30 minutes every morning. And I'll touch in with all my centers and it'll be great.
Yeah.
What's wrong with why?
Well, the problem is when we're working with the Enneagram, we're working with our blind spots.
Yeah.
Right? And we can't see our blind spots.
Yeah.
Obviously. Or else they wouldn't be blind spots. So our teacher provides us so much.
Yeah.
But somebody who can stand on the outside and be like, well, have you thought about this? Have you put it this way? Somebody to ask you those questions that maybe you're not even conscious of, that you're not aware of. Ask us the questions that we don't know to ask ourselves. Point out our blind spots. Help us see what we can't see.
Yeah.
The value of a teacher is really it can't be overstated.
Can I ask a question in this context? In talking about this kind of work, does a therapist count as a teacher?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. As far as these sub-steps and creating the capacity to do the work that the Enneagram is offering us. Have a practice, a way to check in with all 3 centers, a way to work with all 3 centers and create space in and capacity in all 3 of these centers, to have a teacher to help us with that practice, right? Help us see what the practice needs to be, to help us, guide us towards what we need to be working on in order to be more balanced, etc. But then also we need a community. We need a community of people who are also engaged in this work. Because without that, we're missing out on the opportunities to work, right? There's, again, the value of a community can't be overstated, especially in this time. True. We're really feeling our need for community. Even people who are quote unquote loners or introverts we're really feeling our biological need for community. And we need community in all different ways, but in this particular context, we need an intentional community that's focused around these tenets, right? We need to be working with people who are also doing their work. Yeah. Because a community, first of all, provides us lots of opportunities to do our work. Yeah. In the friction that we feel with other people.
We can interact with so many types.
Exactly. But also we can see more of ourselves in what irritates us about other people.
That is so true.
And not just irritating, but also what we love and value about other people. And we need the support that community offers. There's a lot of psychological and physical safety that community provides. These are all of the kind of pieces and practice, a teacher, or what I like to call a lineage, and community. They all kind of work together in this kind of system of checks and balances, right? We have a practice, but our teacher kind of checks our practice and makes sure that it's solid. And we really need our practice for how we're interacting with our community. And we have this community to kind of check how we're relating to our teacher, to kind of keep that relationship from becoming unhealthy or unsupportive. And then our practice really kind of checks how we engage in community. And there's this really beautiful symbiotic, almost Trinitarian relationship that these 3 pieces have that help us to create the best possible conditions for us to do this kind of in the moment, deep internal work. And so, when we're talking about what is Enneagram work, it's the ability to, in the moment, observe ourselves and to respond from our highest and best instead of reacting from our habitual type patterns. Now, how we get to a place where we can actually do that work, we need these 3 pillars of practice, lineage, and community in order to create the space and best environment for this work to happen.